Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a really foundational chapter in human anatomy, tissues, and early embryology. Our goal is to give you that accelerated, crystal clear roadmap you need to master this material.
And our mission here is to structure this whole histological landscape. We're going to define the four fundamental tissue types, understand their unique structural rules, and really connect those rules to how the body actually functions, heals, and ages, all without needing a microscope in front of you.
Okay, let's just unpack that for a second. The architecture of the human body it's just astounding. I mean, we're talking about trillions of cells.
Brilliance.
And yet all of that complexity is built from a vocabulary of only about 200 different cell types. The second a cell picks its identity, that process we call differentiation, it basically sets its own fate.
And that specialization is really the cornerstone of life. Histology, which is the study of these tissues, shows us there are four core functional pillars that build every single organ system. First, you have epithelial tissue that provides boundaries, covers surfaces, handles secretion. Second is connective tissue. Think of it as the universal filler, the support system, and the transport network.
The scaffolding.
The scaffolding, exactly. Then muscle tissue, which is all about contraction and movement. And finally, neural tissue, specialized for conducting these complex electrical impulses. So that framework of covering, supporting, contracting, and communicating, that's the key to understanding everything else.
So let's dive into that first pillar then, epithelial tissue. This is the body's essential barrier, right? It's your skin, it lines all your internal tubes, makes up your glands. So what are the sort of non-negotiable architectural rules that define all epithelia?
There are 5 core rules, and they are extremely specific. So rule 1 is intense cellularity. Unlike most other tissues, epithelia are made almost entirely of cells just packed tightly together.
Just very little space in between.
Almost none. Then rule 2 is polarity. Every single epithelial cell has a distinct exposed apical surface, that's the top, and an attached basal surface, which is the bottom.
So there's always a top-down construction. It's got a direction. And that base has to be anchored to something.
Precisely. That's rule 3, attachment. The basal surface is bound to what we call the basal lamina. And it's a fascinating structure, actually. It's made of 2 parts. A clear layer that the epithelium itself secretes, and then a dense layer that's secreted by the connective tissue underneath it. It's a composite anchor.
Now, here's a big one, I think, with huge implications for health and repair. Avascularity.
Yes. Rule 4, avascularity. Epithelia have 0 blood vessels, none. They are completely dependent on diffusion from that underlying connective tissue for their nutrients and to get rid of waste.
Which is a necessary feature for a barrier, but it definitely comes with a cost.
It does. And that leads to rule 5, regeneration, because they're the body's main interface. You know, they take all the abrasion, dehydration, chemical stress. They have to be constantly replaced. So stem cells down near that basal lamina are continuously dividing to replace the cells that are lost at the top.
And this all supports 4 main functions then.
Right. Protection from damage, controlling permeability, so deciding what gets absorbed or secreted, sensation, sometimes through specialized neuroepithelia for things like taste or smell, and finally, secretion from gland cells.
I think the surface specializations are a perfect example of form-meeting function. If you think about absorption in the gut, the cell surface almost looks like a shag carpet just to maximize that contact.
That's the microvilli. There are these tiny, non-moving folds in the cell membrane, and they increase the surface area by, like, a factor of 20. They're passive.
Okay, passive.
But you contrast that with cilia, which are much longer, and they beat in this coordinated rhythm. Think of your respiratory tract. The cilia there act like a constant escalator, actively sweeping mucus and all the trapped junk up toward your throat so you can get rid of it. They're all about movement over the surface.
So when we classify these tissues, it really just boils down to an architectural choice based on 2 things: how many layers you have and the shape of the cells at the very top.
Exactly. The layering is critical. Simple epithelia are just a single fragile layer. You only find them in protected areas where the main goal is really fast absorption or diffusion.
And the opposite would be?
Stratified epithelia. Multiple layers stacked up, which makes them way sturdier. They're designed for areas that see a lot of mechanical stress.
And the shapes are pretty intuitive. Squamous is flat and thin, good for diffusion. Cuboidal is square-ish, good for secretion. And columnar is tall and slender. You just combine those and you have the roadmap.
Let's just run through a few key examples to lock it in. The most delicate is simple squamous epithelium. Because it's so thin, you find it where transfer needs to be super fast. The alveoli or air sacs in the lungs, the lining of the heart and vessels, the endothelium, and the lining of your body cavities, the mesothelium. You want those barriers to be absolutely minimal.
And you contrast that minimal barrier with maximum protection. That would be stratified squamous epithelium. This is what you have on your skin, where it's keratinized, made tough and waterproof by keratin protein.
Right. Or if it's lining, say, your mouth or your vagina, it's non-keratinized, which means it has to be kept moist.
And there are a couple of oddballs, too.
Two specialized ones, yeah. The pseudostratified columnar epithelium is basically an illusion. It looks stratified because the nuclei are all at different levels,
Yeah.
but every single cell actually touches the basal lamina.
Yeah.
It's almost always ciliated, like in the trachea.
And the other.
The other is the incredibly flexible transitional epithelium. It's a stratified type that can stretch dramatically without tearing. It's essential for organs like the urinary bladder, which have to, distend and then recoil.
Okay, so to wrap up epithelia, we have to talk glands. The basic distinction seems simple. Exocrine glands use ducts to release secretions, and endocrine glands are ductless. They just release hormones into the bloodstream.
But here's where it gets really interesting. The actual physical mechanics of exocrine secretion are super varied, and they define the gland's whole life cycle. The most common is merocrine secretion. The product is packaged up in vesicles and released by exocytosis. The cell basically just spits it out and stays intact. Most glands do this.
Then you have the kind of secretion that actually costs the cell some of its own structure.
Yes. In apicrine secretion, the whole apical part of the cell's cytoplasm, which is loaded up with the product, just pinches off and is lost in the process. The cell has to repair and rebuild itself after each secretion. A good example is the specialized ceruminous glands in the ear canal.
And then there's the most aggressive method, the complete sacrifice, holocrine secretion.
Holocrine is total annihilation. The cell fills itself up with product, and then it literally bursts and dies to release everything. Think about the sebaceous or oil glands in your skin. This means the gland function depends entirely on constant rapid division of stem cells to replace the cells that are destroyed. It's a really costly, high turnover system.
That sets the stage perfectly for our second pillar, connective tissues. We're shifting from a wall of cells to a vast system for support and defense.
Right, and the single most defining trait of connective tissue, or CT, is the dominance of the extracellular matrix. If epithelia are mostly cells, connective tissues are mostly matrix. It's a mix of protein fibers suspended in this fluid we call ground substance. CT provides the body's structure, its protection, support, energy storage, transport, defense. It does it all.
We tend to organize them into three big buckets. Connective tissue proper, which is loose or dense, fluid CT, like blood and lymph, and supporting CT, which is cartilage and bone. Let's start with connective tissue proper. This is where you find both the permanent residents and the wandering defense forces.
The fixed cells are your construction crew. You've got fibroblasts making the fibers, fibrocytes maintaining them, adipocytes storing fat, and mesenchymal stem cells ready to differentiate when there's an injury. Then the wandering cells are your defense assets, free macrophages for defense, and mast cells which release histamine and heparin to kick off inflammation.
And the function of the tissue is really dictated by its three fiber types. Collagen fibers are thick, straight, and incredibly strong. We call them biological ropes, right? They give massive tensile strength to things like tendons.
Absolutely. Then you have reticular fibers, which are thinner and form a delicate branching framework, a stroma inside soft organs like the liver or spleen, and then elastic fibers, which contain elastin and can stretch up to 150% of their length and then snap right back. You need those in places like the ligaments between your vertebrae.
Okay, so within the loose category, we have areolar tissue. This seems to be the body's general-purpose packing material. It's got an open framework, cushions organs, and it lets things move independently, like your skin sliding over muscle.
That's a perfect description. And then you have adipose tissue, which is just dominated by adipocytes storing fat.
And there's a key distinction between fat types, right?
A huge one. White fat is what most adults have. It's for padding, insulation, energy storage. But brown fat is specialized for generating heat. It's packed with mitochondria and blood vessels, and it's critical for keeping infants warm. It literally burns energy just to produce heat.
This is a good time for a quick clinical note. When we talk about removing large amounts of adipose tissue, we're talking about liposuction. The sources really emphasize that while it's common, it has risks, fluid balance issues, bleeding, and it's not a permanent fix.
Not at all. Because connective tissue is designed to regenerate Any long-term effect requires real lifestyle changes. Otherwise, that tissue can and will grow back.
So shifting to dense connective tissue, now we're talking about being fiber dominant. Dense regular CT is built to resist huge forces, but in only one direction.
Right, think of a tendon connecting a muscle to a bone. All the collagen fibers are parallel, like a massive cable. But dense irregular CT is the opposite. Its fibers are all interwoven into a chaotic mesh, so it can resist forces from multiple directions. You find that in the deep layer of the skin, the dermis, or in the capsules around organs.
Okay, on to supporting CT, cartilage and bone. Cartilage is defined by that firm, gel-like matrix. Its cells, the chondrocytes, live in these little isolated chambers called lacunae.
And cartilage is the ultimate vascular tissue. All the nutrient exchange happens by this slow diffusion through the gel. It's usually wrapped in a perichondrium that helps with growth, either by adding layers to the surface, which is appositional growth, or by growing from within, which is interstitial growth.
And there are three distinct types.
Yeah. Hyaline cartilage is the most common, very flexible, covers joint surfaces. Elastic cartilage is springy, like your external ear. And fibrous cartilage is packed with collagen, making it an amazing shock absorber. That's what your intervertebral discs are made of.
And the clinical connection here is pretty grim.
It is, because articular cartilage, the cartilage in your joints, is avascular, and it doesn't have a perichondrium. Any injury to it, like a torn meniscus in your knee, heals extremely slowly, if it heals at all. It pays a very heavy price for its resilience.
You contrast that with bone, or osseous tissue. The matrix is rigid, full of collagen and calcium salts. Its cells, the osteocytes, are also in lacunae, but they're all connected by these tiny channels called canaliculi for rapid nutrient exchange. Bone is highly vascular, and it's covered by the periosteum, so it can repair and remodel itself throughout your entire life. So moving from the individual tissues, we see how they combine to form the body's protective membranes, where epithelia and connective tissue meet.
There are four types. First, mucous membranes, or mucosae. They line any passage that's open to the outside digestive, respiratory, urinary tracts. They're always kept moist, and that underlying connective tissue layer is called the lamina propria.
Second, serous membranes. They line the sealed internal cavities, the pleura around the lungs, the peritoneum in the abdomen, the pericardium around the heart. Their job is to secrete a watery lubricant, a transudate, to reduce friction.
Third is the cutaneous membrane, which is just your skin. It's unique because it's thick, waterproof, and normally dry.
And fourth, synovial membranes. They line our movable joint cavities and produce synovial fluid for lubrication. And they're interesting because their cellular layer is actually incomplete and doesn't have a basal lamina.
And all these membranes fit into the larger organization of the connective tissue framework, or fascia. Fascia is really the scaffolding that holds your entire body together.
There are three layers to it. The most superficial one is the superficial fascia, also called the subcutaneous layer or hypodermis. It's mostly loose connective tissue, providing padding and insulation.
Deep to that, you have the deep fascia. This is a powerhouse of dense regular CT. It forms a strong, fibrous framework, almost like plywood, resisting forces from all over and surrounding your organs and muscles. It's what connects everything into one cohesive unit.
And finally, the subserous fascia.
Right. It's a layer of loose CT that sits between the deep fascia and those delicate serous membranes. Its job is subtle, but critical. It stops the movement of your muscles from pulling on and distorting those linings.
Okay, that brings us to our third and fourth pillars, which are specialized for action. Muscle and neural tissues. Muscle tissue is all about its ability to contract. Its cytoplasm is called sarcoplasm, and its membrane is the sarcolemma.
And the three types differ profoundly in their control and their ability to repair themselves. Skeletal muscle fibers are huge, they have multiple nuclei, and they're striated, or banded. They're voluntary, and really importantly, they can undergo partial repair because of these stem cells called myosatellite cells.
Then you have cardiac muscle. The cells are smaller, branched, also striated, but usually with just one nucleus. They're connected by these strong structures called intercalated discs.
And they are involuntary, driven by pacemaker cells. But here's the key difference.
Yeah.
They have virtually no regenerative capacity. Once that tissue is damaged, the loss is permanent.
And the third type?
Smooth muscle. Small, tapered cells, not striated, single nucleus. They're involuntary, found in the walls of blood vessels and the digestive tract. And unlike cardiac muscle, they can regenerate pretty efficiently.
Our final pillar, then, is neural tissue, the communication specialist. Two main cell types here, neurons and neuroglia.
The neurons are the actual communicators. They have the soma, or cell body, the dendrites for receiving signals, and a single axon for sending signals away. They can be incredibly long, but they pay the ultimate price for that specialization. Their ability to divide and repair is severely limited.
And the neuroglia are just the support crew.
They're the indispensable support crew. They're a diverse group that regulates the fluid around the neurons, provides them with nutrients, and maintains the whole structural framework. Without the neuroglia, neurons just can't function.
Looking at this whole system through the lens of time, the chapter really emphasizes that aging takes a toll on all four pillars. Epithelia get thinner, connective tissue becomes more fragile. That's why you see easier bruising and brittle bones.
Right, but the most critical cumulative loss is in those cells that can't divide, cardiac muscle cells and neurons.
And this vulnerability directly leads to the clinical reality of tumor formation.
It does. Neoplasms or cancers are categorized based on where they started. Carcinomas come from epithelia. Sarcomas come from connective tissue. And the deadliest stage, metastasis, is when tumor cells break free, invade other tissues, and use the body's own transport systems like blood and lymph to set up new tumors elsewhere.
To really understand why some cells can't regenerate, we have to zoom all the way back to the very beginning, early embryology. It all starts with the zygote, which becomes the blastocyst, which has that inner cell mass. By day 14, that mass splits into the three primary germ layers, ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm.
And the fate of those three layers is the ultimate roadmap. The key insight here is the mesenchyme. It's the first connective tissue to appear, and it's derived from those germ layers. And this mesenchyme gives rise to all adult connective tissues, bone, cartilage, loose, dense, all of it. That shared lineage is why those tissues, for the most part, are so good at repairing themselves throughout life.
While the epithelia and glands also develop from these layers, with the glands splitting based on whether they keep a duct, making them exocrine, or lose it to become endocrine.
The essential takeaway is that the most specialized tissues, those non-dividing neurons and cardiac muscle cells, they make their big functional commitment very early on. And in doing so, they often lose the stem cell potential that their cousins in the connective tissue family get to keep.
This has been a complete deep dive into the four foundational tissue types. So, to recap the core distinction, we have avascular epithelia, built for protection and secretion, and they're always anchored to this highly vascular, matrix-heavy connective tissue that provides all the support and transport.
And remember that regenerative contrast. Most connective tissues coming from mesenchyme are pretty good at healing. Skeletal muscle has its myosatellite cells. But that highly specialized neural tissue and cardiac muscle, they pay the ultimate price for their function by sacrificing their ability to replenish.
So what does this all mean for the bigger picture as you move forward in your studies?
Well, we noted that aging really exposes the fragility of those specialized, non-dividing cells like cardiac muscle and neurons. If you connect this back to embryology, you see that this amazing function is achieved by basically abandoning the repair potential of that mesenchyme lineage very early on. So it raises an important question for you to consider as you study later systems. When you're looking at a vulnerable, non-healing organ, how much of that lifelong fragility was already predetermined by its initial developmental choice to pursue specialization over regeneration?
A compelling thought to end on: the inherent cost of specialization. Thank you for sharing your sources with us and for joining us on this essential deep dive. We appreciate you trusting the last-minute lecture team with your study time.